This is Sports Overdrive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sports Overdrive, May the 30th, 2014. Taylor Jones hanging out with you. And I'd like to thank all the listeners who are tuning in today, whether it be online or on your car radio, if you're listening at work, however you're listening to us. Thanks again for tuning us in and spending time with us on this Friday afternoon. Our first guest on the show is a writer for WarChant.com, the Florida State division of Rivals.com. He is a baseball beat writer covering the Seminoles baseball team. They're 43-15 this year, 21-9 in ACC play. They are hosting the Tallahassee Regional this weekend, which includes three teams that are near and dear to our hearts: the Kennesaw State Owls, the Georgia Southern Eagles, and the Crimson Tide of Alabama. They'll all be playing in Tallahassee this weekend for a chance to go to the Super Regional. Some news and notes from Florida State baseball before we get you into this interview. DJ Stewart, he is a semifinalist for the Golden Spikes Award. He has a .388 average, which is incredibly good. 11 doubles, 4 home runs, and 30 RBI. And probably the most popular college athlete of 2013-2014, Jameis Winston. For those of you who don't know, he also plays baseball. Not only football, he's a two-sport man, if you will. He has a 1.17 ERA. He's 1-0, has 7 saves in 30.2 innings pitched, and he's also struck out 29 batters, all in that span. So without any further ado, from Rivals.com's WarChant.com, here's Ben Jones on Sports Overdrive. Joining us now on Sports Overdrive, you can read his articles on WarChant.com, the Florida State division of Rivals.com. It's Ben Jones. And Ben, how are you today?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. We're bringing you on the show now to talk about Florida State baseball. And when I set this interview up last week, I thought, okay, well, Florida State's probably got the best chance to host a regional of anywhere around here. But what I did not know at the time was who would also play in that region. And watching the regional show yesterday, Alabama, Georgia Southern, and Kennesaw State are all three in the region, which makes this interview much more interesting than I once thought. So an honor to have you on the show today. We're going to talk Florida State baseball, going to talk tournament as well. But first we'll ask you just the season in general. Florida State baseball coming off another phenomenal season, 43 wins, and also another deep run in the ACC tournament last weekend. So looking back at the 2014 season, what were some of the more exciting moments?
Some of the more exciting moments probably would have been the series win at Clemson. When they were on the road, they took 2 out of 3 from Clemson. The time Clemson was playing very well. They also swept NC State earlier in the year. NC State, obviously a team that was expected to do much, much better this year than they did, but still was, considered at the time to be a very, very talented team. And I think that was a top 5 matchup when it took place. So that was really impressive when that finally occurred. I think if you want to look at kind of one trend over the course of the whole season that was really impressive, it would probably have to be that Florida State was undefeated in doubleheaders this year. I think they ended up being 8-0, or maybe it was even 10-0. In 4 or 5 doubleheaders this year, which is astounding to think of when you think about how difficult it is just to win one, both ends of it.
Looking at the stats this season, a ton of RBIs are being driven across the plate. John Nagowski and DJ Stewart are 1 RBI away from being tied at the top of the list. So how special are these 2 players at the plate, and who are some other Seminoles who have been key at the plate this season?
Yeah, it really all has to start with DJ Stewart. He's the ACC Player of the Year as a sophomore. Just a tremendous, tremendous hitter who had an on-base streak that stretched all the way into last season. I think it reached 65 games before he finally went 0 for 4 one day. He's one of the best offensive players in the country, and he's a big reason why so many guys behind him get chances to hit. He's a guy who gets on base at a really, really high rate, and pitchers really don't like to face him. And so when they're forced to put him on base sometimes, then they have to pitch to guys like John Nagowski and Jose Brizuela behind him. When they opened the season, there was no doubt, really, that DJ was going to hit third. It was a matter of finding protection for him in the lineup. And they kind of bounced between a few guys before they finally settled on John Nagowski hitting fourth and then Jose Brizuela hitting fifth. And that's really where the lineup is settled. I think that's probably their best look this year.
We'll now bring up the most popular college athlete of the 2013-2014 season, Jameis Winston. And we all know what he can do on the football field, winning the Heisman Trophy this past season, but many may not know about his pitching ability. So how well has Jameis performed this season on the mound?
He's been very good. He's the closer for the team, for those of you all that don't know out there. He's not a guy that's going to go out and, pitch an inning or get 4 or 5 outs every game. He's not necessarily their top reliever, but he is the guy that they go to when the game's really tight in the ninth inning. He's a guy that they certainly trust in, very close situations and pressure situations. And he's a really, really talented pitcher overall. He's a guy who, as a reliever, they can keep his pitch count down. He can throw really, really hard. That's just kind of where he fits best on this team, I think.
And we'll keep pitching on the agenda here. Luke Weaver, his name shows up a lot in the stats. He leads in innings pitched, he leads in games started and wins, and he's also a junior as well. So how valuable is his arm and leadership, and do you see him being drafted next season, if not this season?
Yeah, Luke Weaver is projected, or was projected at the start of the year to be a first-round draft pick this year. So there's a lot of doubt over whether or not he'd be back next year. Certainly as a first-round pick, you would have to expect that he would leave at that point. He was an All-American candidate. You're absolutely right. He sets up the rest of the rotation. When you can get your Friday night starter like him to go out and give you 7 solid innings week in and week out, really sets up the bullpen for the rest of the weekend. And since they've had some injuries elsewhere in the starting rotation this year, it's been even that much more important for them.
And we can't discuss Florida State baseball without talking about the legend that is Coach Mike Martin. And if I'm not mistaken, in his 35-year career, he has not had a season in which he and his Seminole teams have failed to win more than 40 games. So what is it about Coach Martin that his players and fellow coaches love and respect about him, and how special is he to the city and to the university?
I think one of the things that has really helped them over, it's 37 years now, 2 years when he was an assistant when they've won 40 or more games, which is, incredible to think of. I think one of the things that really sets him apart is that his message today is probably the same that it was 35 years ago when he took over. This is a team that is going to put high value on defense and pitching and patience at the plate. That's something that they've always done here, and if you go and look at the numbers for this year's team, I think they lead the nation in walks, so they're up there near the top. So things don't necessarily change around here at Florida State, and that's probably for the best with this program.
We'll discuss now some of the former Seminoles who have had the pleasure to be coached by Mike Martin and have continued their careers into the major leagues. How are some of the former Seminoles, including Buster Posey and others, performing thus far in the 2014 MLB season?
I haven't checked in on a lot of those guys. Buster Posey is definitely one of the headliners. You'd also probably want to look at Shane Robinson, who was National Player of the Year here back in 2005 and is an outfielder now. I think he's up with the Cardinals organization, although I'd have to double-check on that.
And when I set this interview up, I believe that there was really no doubt that Florida State would host a regional, but just like we said earlier, Kennesaw State, Georgia Southern, and Alabama are all going to be in there. So a lot of interesting teams as far as us on the Alabama-Georgia line are concerned. So I guess we'll preview the Florida State side of the tournament now. You guys are hosting it for the past couple of years. So who are some of the players that Georgia Southern, Kennesaw State, and Alabama fans should look out for on the Florida State side of things? And what would be the key in Florida State winning this regional in order to go to the Super Regionals next weekend?
Well, offensively for Florida State, we already talked about DJ Stewart, who's one of the best hitters in the country. He's a guy that you're definitely going to want to keep an eye on whenever he's up at the plate. John Nagowski and Jose Brizuela are also threats kind of in the middle of the lineup. Elsewhere, I'd keep a real close eye on Ben Deluzio, the freshman center fielder. He's been batting sixth for Florida State lately, but he's one of the fastest guys that you'll ever see playing college baseball. I think he's 16 for 18 this year in steals. So the third-round draft pick of the Marlins coming out of high school and decided to go to Florida State anyways. So he's a guy who has a lot of talent and is really only going to get better over the next couple of years. In the pitching staff, you might want to keep an eye to see if there's a guy named Brandon Liebrand who comes out to pitch this weekend. He's missed the second half of the season with a really bad bone contusion just in his knee after taking a ball there in practice. If he's able to come back, he was, I think, leading the ACC in ERA as a starter before he had that injury. He's a guy who would make a big difference, even if you're just giving him 2 or 3 innings out of the bullpen in relief this weekend.
We'll now focus on the other three teams in the tournament, Kennesaw State, Georgia Southern, and Alabama. And Alabama, I don't know what it is. It seems like Alabama's played in the Tallahassee Regional more than Florida State has. They're no stranger to the Tallahassee Regional, and they had a bit of a disappointing end to the SEC tournament last week as pitching, their strong suit, just had an off day in their day one loss to Kentucky. What are your thoughts on Alabama and the other teams coming into the tournament?
No, I think that Alabama is absolutely not a team that you can count out doing this. Going into this weekend, it's not as though Alabama should necessarily be a favorite or that Florida State is not the favorite, because they are. Florida State has been consistently one of the best teams in the country this year. But Alabama certainly has the firepower and has been through the SEC, so they know what it's going to take down a team like Florida State. Elsewhere, I think Georgia Southern is also a team that is worth keeping an eye on. The 4-1 matchup on Friday night is always pretty interesting. Florida State has decided to throw Mike Compton, its number 2 starter, in the Friday game as opposed to going with its number 3 starter. That's always kind of a balance, a kind of a gamble you have to play with going into a regional. But the fact that they're throwing their number 2 starter as opposed to a midweek guy really shows the respect that they have for the ability on that team, I think.
And we know that you are the baseball writer for WarChant.com, but I'm sure you've had a fun experience with football winning the national title, Jameis Winston winning the Heisman, and also softball. They're heading to the Women's College World Series in Oklahoma City this week. So along with baseball making an amazing run for Omaha so far, what is the overall vibe in Tallahassee surrounding the amazing academic year that Florida State has had in athletics?
I think people have certainly been really excited. I don't think there's anything that could really make Tallahassee more excited than a national championship in football, and especially given the circumstances in which it occurred this year. I think most people really thought that 2012, E.J. Manuel's last year, or 2014, when they had a quarterback with a little bit more experience, would have been more likely to be national champions. The national championship this year probably came a little bit early, I think most people would tell you. And with Jameis Winston coming back next year, they're hoping that the national championship didn't just come a year early, but the next one comes on time also.
Ben Jones, follow him on Twitter for all the latest Florida State baseball news at WarChantBen, and also WarChant.com from Rivals.com, where you can read all of his articles. Ben, we want to thank you again for taking time out of your day to speak with us, and good luck to the Seminoles this weekend.
Hey, I appreciate it, Taylor.
From WarChant.com, the Florida State division of Rivals.com, that was Ben Jones, baseball beat writer for Florida State baseball. We previewed the Tallahassee Regional, which features Kennesaw State, Georgia Southern, Alabama, and the Seminoles from Florida State. Also talked about their legendary head coach Mike Martin, as well as a little Jameis Winston talk, among other things. The Tallahassee Regional this weekend features Kennesaw State, Georgia Southern, Alabama, and the Noles from Florida State. The winner of the Tallahassee Regional will go on to take on the winner of the Louisville Regional, which features Kentucky, Kansas, Kent State, and Louisville. So there is a good possibility that A.J. Reed, the SEC Player of the Year, gets to take on one of the top baseball programs in the nation. Won't that be a lot of fun? Ben Jones, if you'd like to read his articles as well as get up-to-the-minute updates from Florida State baseball and other sports surrounding Florida State, give him a follow on Twitter. That's at WarChantBen. If you're a Rivals.com subscriber, go to WarChant.com and read everything you can think of on Florida State baseball. We'll have more show in just a few moments. This is Sports Overdrive.